Excel Payroll Spreadsheet using formulas, functions, logical statements, and lookups. In this assignment, we're going to do something slightly different. You're going to need three things. You're going to need this PowerPoint, the video you're watching, and the spreadsheet, which has the base numbers and stuff filled out for you that we're going to build on. What we're going to be creating is a payroll spreadsheet. This is something you could use in any business where you would track the hours, the wages, the overtime, the deductions, and so forth to come up with some basic calculations of how much to pay your employees. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow along in the PowerPoint and then bounce back and forth between this and Excel and complete the spreadsheet as we go. So the first part is download the spreadsheet. Now the spreadsheet then has some basic items already filled out. We have the name of your employees, how many dependents, how much they make, how many hours they work that week. And I'd like you to also notice down the bottom left, we have this area called assumptions. What the assumptions are is these are things we pulled out of the formulas later on. There are things that might change. Things that are your basic items like how many hours you have to work before you get overtime. What's the overtime rate? What are the different taxes? How much are we going to do for deductions for dependents and so forth? The reason we pull these out is then if we need to change any of them, we don't have to change the entire spreadsheet. All we have to do is just come down to here and change the formula here. Just change this total and everything that's based on this will change as well. So let's begin. In fact, I think the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this little G. I'm going to grab this in between here, spread that. That's better. Okay. So let's begin. Calculating pay then. So how do we calculate pay? Well, you have the base number, which is called your gross pay. And the gross pay is a combination of your regular pay and your overtime pay. So what's the regular pay? The regular pay is the hours you've worked that is less than or equal to 40, or the base working hours as we have in there. Those number of hours times the hourly wage. So we have two formulas here. We have the one which we talked about just now, which is the hours worked under 40 times the wage. So 20 hours worked, $10 per hour, $200 you earn that week. But then there's the other side of it, which is, what if I worked more than 40? I want overtime for that. We get time and a half. We wrote that down on the spreadsheet. So if we're getting time and a half, then we've got a different thing here we need to figure out. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate out the overtime and put that in its own column and calculate that. So we're going to say anything that exceeds 40, we're going to deal with that later. So our formula basically has two parts. We do one thing if it's less than 40, and then if it's 40 or more, we just treat it like 40, and we take care of the rest later. So there's the two parts. Less than 40, handle one way. 40 or more, we just act like it's 40 even. So how are we going to connect these two together? We're going to use an if statement. Now, if statements are really powerful. It lets us do multiple options in one formula. Now, an if statement allows us to then say, okay, we have a statement or a question, which is if the hours is less than 40. And that's the first thing we're saying, hours less than 40. So if the hours are less than 40, what are we going to do? We're going to take the hours and multiply it times the wage. If it's not less than 40, then we just take 40 and multiply it by the wage. And here's how these are built. There's your if statement. We open a parentheses. All the functions have parentheses built into them. Inside the parentheses, we'll put the pieces. So we're going to take hours less than 40, that's the statement, comma, if true, hours times wage, comma, if false, $40 times wage. So let's try this thing in Excel now. So in Excel, I want you to use your mouse when you're building these. Don't just sit here and type the numbers and stuff that I have. One, you'll probably make a mistake. And two, you're not going to have the translation in your head of what hourly wage means. You're just going to go, oh, that's C5. Now, I want you to think about what it actually means when you're clicking on these, and it makes it a lot easier for you. Now, there's another part to this. Anytime we refer to something that's on a different row, like down here, and we do not want this to shift, we want to lock it down. You're going to use the dollar signs to lock this down. We use that in one of the previous lessons. What the dollar signs does is if I put a dollar sign before the letter B, it locks the B in place. I put it in front of the 21, it locks the 21 in place. That way, when I start copying and pulling this down, it's going to go with me. Otherwise, what happens is the first person gets 40 in their formula, the next person gets 1.5, the next person gets 0.0765, and so forth. That's not going to work out very well. So let's try out this first formula. Okay, so regular pay. Every formula begins with a equals. Now it's an if statement, so let's go find it. Formulas. Lookup and reference. Nope. Let's look under logical. There we go. Lookup and reference is our lookup statements. We'll use those later. So, if. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can see what's going on. So the first part we're saying is that number is less than 40. You could do less than or equals to. It would be the same thing. If that's the case, I want to stop here though. Let's take that 40 out. Because down here, base work hours, they made that one of the assumptions. That way they could change the base work hours. So let's click on that instead. So it says D5 less than B21. And I'm going to hit the F4 key on your keyboard. If you're on the Mac users, you can look it up or just put the dollar signs in by hand. And what that does is that's going to put our dollar signs in for us automatically. In fact, if you keep tapping it, it toggles through all the possible combinations. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. If true, what are we going to do? Well, if that's true, it's less than 40. What did we say? We said take the hours worked and times them by the hourly wage. Okay. If false, click on the next one, what are we going to do? Well, we said let's just take that 40, lock it down, and multiply that by the hourly wage. Because if it's 48, we're going to deal with the 8 later, so it must be just 40. So we're just going to deal with the 40, pull the 8 out for later. Okay? Now we're looking at this here. We can see, yes, it's false. These are different numbers. It came up with a solution. Good. Hit OK. Okay, let's try the next one. So the overtime wage. Now, overtime is slightly different. This is where we're just going to figure out that which exceeds the 40. And if it exceeds the 40, we're going to times that by the hourly wage, whatever they make, and multiply that by the overtime rate. Now, if it's not over 40, we don't want to give them anything. We're not going to pay extra for it if they hadn't even worked over 40. And there's a problem there. If I just do a minus 40 in my formula, like hours worked minus 40, and they only work 30, that gets a negative value. That's not what we need. So, we need to do another if statement. So we're going to say this time is we'll say, hey, if the hours are under 40, let's not do anything. Just put a 0 in there. Otherwise, then we'll run the formula to calculate it. So if the hours are less than 40, 0. Otherwise, else the hours minus 40 times the wage times the overtime rate. Notice these extra parentheses? Know why? Order of progression. You remember order of progression? The parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. Please excuse my dear Aunt Susie. This is the order the math is handled in. So if I don't use parentheses, it's going to take 40, multiply it by the wage of $10 or something. So I got 400, multiply it then the overtime rate. Now I've got like, what would that be, about 500 or so. And then I'm going to take that. How many hours did he work? Oh, we only worked 48. Okay, well, we're going to take 48 minus 500 something. That's not going to work. So by putting the parentheses, it does the 48 minus 40 first, giving us 8 hours, and then multiplies that across. So let's try it in Excel. This time though, make sure we put dollar signs. We need to lock down the base work hours. We need to lock down the overtime rate. And we have to make sure we use the parentheses when you're building this. Let's try it out. So every formula begins with an equal. We went up to logical. We found if. And the first question was, if this is less than 40. If that's true, 0. Now I could do less than or equal to. But if it comes out 40, 40 minus 40 is 0, it's all going to come out to being 0 anyways. So, if it's false, what were we going to do? Well, first thing we need to do is figure out, oh, I did it again. Get that 40 out of there. We're supposed to use the base work hours and lock it down. Okay, remember that? Go back up to logical. I didn't remember it. Go back to the logical test. Back out that 40. Go click on that base work hours and lock it down. It's not tragic if you don't. It's still going to work. And really, we haven't changed the base work hours of 40 forever and ever on. But I think it's just so you can understand how these dollar sign things work. Okay, with that said, back to here again. If it's false. So now we've got 48 hours. Let's make that 48 40. So open parentheses. Take the hours they worked minus that 40 over here, lock it down, got it that time, close the parenthesis. So now we're down about 8. See, it shows me 8. So what do we do with that 8? Well, we multiply that 8 by their hourly wage, and then multiply that by the overtime rate. And lock down the overtime rate. It's way down there. Again, the reason why is the next guy's only getting a 7% overtime rate. Rip off. Next guy's getting a $50, 50 times overtime rate. He's happy. So we don't want to do this. We want to make sure it stays the same for everybody. So we have to lock that in place. So now it's showing me $119.40. Perfect. All right, so let's see how it worked. So, gross pay. How do you figure out the gross pay? Well, the gross pay is just going to be those two added together. That's all. Don't put any dollar signs in there. Don't try to get fancy. We're not going to lock it down or anything. Just add the regular and add the overtime pay together. That's the gross pay. So let's quickly do that one. Take this equals regular pay plus overtime pay. Okay? There we are. Let's move on. Taxable pay. So the taxable pay, how do we calculate this one? Taxable pay is the difference between the gross and there's a deduction thing we have to figure out. We're going to take the number of dependents, we're going to multiply it by the deduction amount they get per dependent, and then back that out of the gross pay. So they get like $50 per dependent. So if they have 2 times 50 is 100, and then we're going to take the gross pay, say they made $500, and back out that $100, so the taxable pay would then be $400. It just reduces it by the amount of the deductible times the number of dependents. Now, I don't need to use parentheses this time. A lot of times I still do, just so I can keep it in mind and helps keep it clear in my head. But really, it's going to multiply first before it even thinks about coming over here and doing the subtraction part. So let's do this one. So we're going to multiply. We're going to take the gross pay minus out the number of dependents times the deduction per dependent, and don't forget to lock it down because it's down here at the bottom. Otherwise, it's going to copy down when you start copying down. What I mean by copy down is we're only doing Abram. We're going to fill out all these formulas and just copy and paste it straight down so we don't have to do every single one of them. But if we don't use the dollar signs, it's going to mess it up. Now, if I was going to do every one of them, I don't need to use the dollar signs, but that sounds like a pain. So taxable pay equals gross pay minus the number of dependents times the deduction per dependent. And let's lock that down. Enter. So why do we even care about taxable pay? Because it's used to figure out the federal withholding. Oops, too far. The federal withholding tax then is calculated using a little table that's there. We're going to take that number you just calculated, the taxable pay, go compare it to the tax rate table, figure out where it falls in that table, then go over to the right and get the number, the multiple, or the percentage is there. To do that, you're going to use a lookup statement. Now, we used this in last week's assignments. The lookup statement then, these are used to return information out of a table from somewhere else. I could do it with an if statement, but it would take like 4, maybe 5 of them to make it all work and be messy and probably wouldn't work anyways. I'd get it wrong somewhere. But a lookup statement then allows me to just say, hey, what are we looking up? That's the lookup value, the first part. So we're looking up the taxable pay, $417. The next part is say, well, where is it at? The table array. Where are we looking? Well, it's that little table down at the bottom of the sheet. The next part then says, well, what's the column number? Which one of the columns in that little table holds the answer that you want to return? And the last part's a little bit tricky. It's just a true or false question, but it changes the way this thing works. The statement is, this is a lookup or a range table. It's a little range. If it's a range, then it's true. And what a range means is it's things like maybe like a grade scale where 80 is a B, 90 and above is an A, and you might get an 82, well then you got a B. Or you might get a 93, well then you got an A. It's close to it. It wasn't listed on there. There wasn't a 93 on the grade scale. We just went to the closest one. That's a range. Anytime it's just going to the closest value. Now, if you're trying to get exact, say we're trying to bring up, think of a phone book and you want to find Palmer James, and you want to find the right one. Otherwise, you end up calling Palmer Jameson. So what you want is, you don't want close. That's not good enough for when you're calling somebody. You want the exact match. So when you're trying to get the exact match, then you have to use false. And those are used for, like, maybe I'm building a big feeds table and I want to compare the age in weeks to what I should be feeding them, or maybe their weight versus the amount they eat, and so forth. So I have this big table and it shows me what it should all match up to. And if there's no in-between values, that means it's going to be a false one. I want it to match exactly. So this one, though, is going to be a range one. So we're going to build this. Now we're going to use what's called a VLOOKUP, as in Victor, or vertical in this case. There's two types. There's a V, as in vertical, or the HLOOKUP, horizontal. The only difference is which way the table lays. This is vertical because it goes up and down. If it was taxable and tax rate, and then like the 0 through 525 went across the top and the percentages went across the bottom, that would be a horizontal. Otherwise, no difference. So the lookup value we're going to use is the taxable pay. The table array are the letters D21 through E25. The column is which column are we looking into. And is close good enough? In this case, yes. Because like 417, there is no 417. So it's going to fall back to 300 and give them 25%. And that's what we should get for Abram, 25%. So here's how this should look. It should look like we bring up the little VLOOKUP. We're going to put in the H5. We're going to put in the range. And notice I locked it down. We're going to put in the column index. And we're going to put in true. So let's just do this. Stop talking about it. So we go to here. Equals lookup all the way to the bottom, vertical lookup. Okay, there is the wizard. What is the lookup value? What are we looking up? We're trying to use that number right there, the 417. We want to go look that up. Where are we trying to look it up at? Let me move this up here. That's the next one, the table array. Well, this is my table right here. So I'm going to highlight that table and lock it down. Why did I lock it down? Because if I copy this one to here, this table would shift down one, and then shift down one more, and then shift down one more and down one, and eventually nothing. No answer will work. So you have to lock it down so that table stays the same. Okay, column index. In this table here, which of these columns has the percentage? Don't go up and look at it and go, oh, that's D. No, it's count over. This is column 1. This is column 2. So our answer is 2. Because we want it to return the percentages. I don't want it to return 300. Okay, this is a range lookup. That is a true statement. So this is a range lookup. What do I mean? It's looking for 417. There's no 417. So unless I want it to return an error message, I need to say it's a range. So what it's going to do is it'll fall back to 300. It doesn't round up to 450 like your grades don't always round up. You wish they did, but they don't round up to the next grade level, even though you're close. So in this case then, we have to use true, and it'll go up to 300, come over to 25, and there it is, 0.25. That's our answer. Hit OK. It look like that? Oh, but we're not done. Because 0.25 is not an answer. That's just the tax rate. We need to figure out, okay, great, we know it's 25%, but now we need to figure out what that's 25% of. And it's 25% of the taxable pay. So I need you to edit that formula you just created. And there's a couple ways of editing it. You can use the F2 button, and that'll bring the formula up, and then just put on the end there, multiply by the taxable rate. So let's try that. Or I can just come up in here into formula bar, which is what I'm going to do. Click in it and multiply by the taxable rate. Don't put any dollar signs because we want that to shift down because each person's going to have their own taxable rate. If I lock it, we're going to figure it out for everybody at that one $417. That's not right. Enter. There. Okay, we're past the hard part. So there it is. Here's how we did it again. The lookup statement, that was our lookup value. That was the first part. The second part was the array. Where was the array? That was this area down here. The third part was saying which column. 1, 2. Second column had the answer. And then we just answered true because this was a range lookup, not an exact match one. Lastly, we came back and we did a times H5 times the taxable pay. We took that 25% and we multiplied it by the taxable pay. That was a big one. All right, so let's do this easy one now. Now we're going to figure out the FICA. The FICA is just multiplying two numbers. We're just going to take the employee's gross pay, not taxable. We don't use taxable anymore. We're going to use the gross pay and multiply that by the flat percentage that's way down there in the assumptions at B23. So, because it's in the assumptions and elsewhere, make sure you lock it down. Let's try it out. So I'm going to come to FICA equals gross pay times, and let's find the FICA. There it is. And lock it down with an F4 key. There, that's it. Okay. So last item on that line, net pay. How do we calculate net pay? Net pay is how much did they earn, their gross pay, and then back out all the stuff they had to pay for, all the taxes. You take out the taxes. Don't take out the taxable pay. They're going to all quit. That'll come to zero. Be less than zero. So what you want to do instead is just take out the federal withholding and then take out the FICA. Okay? Let's try it out. So I come to net pay equals gross pay minus federal withholding minus FICA. Enter. Perfect. Okay, so we've got this all the way across. Let's make it look like money though. It doesn't look like money yet. So I'm going to highlight all of them. And let's format them. I'm going to come to Home. And then I'm going to come over, and I can either click this one straight out, Accounting, or I can hit this drop down and choose Accounting. What's the difference between counting and a currency? The dollar signs line up. That's the only difference. Accountants like it all to line up. So now that I still have it all highlighted, let's grab that little fill handle in the corner. Here's a moment of truth. Did you put the dollar signs in where you needed to? Did you get it all right? Let's see. Drag it down, drag it down, drag it down. Not too far. Just go down to Weston. Let go. Does yours look like that? If you have these numbers, 353.42 as the last one, you're golden. You got it right. If that's not the number you have, you got some undoing and you have to go check it out. So if you need to fix this, let's show the easy way of doing that. First thing I'm going to do is I want to turn this into formulas, not answers, to see what I blew. Did I get it right? Let's double check again. 353.42. Oh, good. All right, good. So here we go. Now to change this into formulas, I hold down the Control key and I tap the tilde. That's the little button up by the number 1. That switches us over to Formula View. Now I can look at it and go, did I put B21s? Yes. B21, yes. Dollar sign, B21s, locked in. Everything's locked in. If you need to make it wider, you can. Just undo fixing it so you can read it later, or just click on it. B24 and so forth. If you got it all right, Control tilde, switch back. Okay, now we did the hard part. Let's wrap this thing up. So we need to do some totals. And we need to do some averages, minimums, and maximums, some statistical type formulas. So these are the formulas you'll be using. You're going to use sum, average, min, and max. And you can find them all in the same place. And when you're done with that, we're going to change them down to at least 2 decimals. Probably accounting format would be best. So let's finish this off. I'm going to come over to totals. And I'm going to show you one of each, and then you can finish them off. So regular pay, how do I figure out the total? I'm going to come up and go to Insert. Oh, nope, take it back, sorry. Formulas, there it is. Drop down right here and hit Sum. Now, because it's right below a perfect list of numbers, it's going to guess the right area. When you do these, it's not going to guess the right area. If it didn't guess the right area, all you have to do is just click, hold, drag, and select the correct area. Okay, I'm going to hit Enter. Now all I need to do is drag it to the right. That one's done. If yours isn't in dollar signs, then you could just do this. Highlight this going across. Go to Home. Use the Format Painter, remember that in Word, and paint the one you like. And that'll switch it over. In fact, that's what I'm going to do down here too. Except, don't do that for hours. Okay, let's do the hours. I'm going to do average, min, max of each of these, and then I need you to fill out on your own gross pay and net pay. So let's do hours. How do we do average? Equals formulas. Drop down. Average. Oop, didn't pop up. Let me hit it again. There it goes. See how I try to guess what it wanted? It's doing like the taxes and everything. No, that's not right. I'm trying to get the hours of the hours over here. So I'm going to go highlight these instead. There. So how do I do the, I'll do one to go down diagonal. You need to fill in the others. So how do I do the highest gross pay? That one equals auto sum max, pushing down too hard, and I need gross pay. Where's gross pay? Here it is. Now I'm going to go back and check. Did I happen to grab the total by mistake last? No, I couldn't have. There isn't one. Okay. Make sure when you're grabbing all the way down, you don't grab the total. That'll mess up your formula. Enter. Okay, I'll do lowest. Remember, you need to do these other ones, though. You need to fill it in. I'm just doing all the way across. You can see one of each. Equals. This time lowest. What is lowest? Lowest is min for minimum. Min. Min. There it goes. Minimum net pay. Almost got it. Don't get the total. Perfect. So what I need you to do is finish these up. If they have too many decimals, go to Home, highlight what you want to knock down in decimals, and decrease the decimals down to 2. Once this is all done, you still need to be able to print it. So when I print this, I don't want to print these notes. These are my directions. I don't want to give that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight just the spreadsheet, just the parts I want to print. Then go to Page Layout, Print Area, Set Print Area. So now when I go to File, Print, it's cut off the stuff below. But this would probably fit better if this was going the other way on the paper. So let's do that next. I'm going to go back to Page Layout, change the orientation to Landscape. Now, sometimes you might have these dotted lines going down here, and I mentioned that in one of the previous lessons. That tells us that it's not fitting onto the same page. This has been set right now to automatically fit to one page by one page. No matter how big it is, it's going to scrunch it down until it fits. If it wasn't set for that, there's my dotted lines. What I could do then is either do what I just did, had it set to one page, or you can drop down the scaling until it fits. When the dotted lines move out, now you know it fits. Now I'm going to go to File, Print. There we go. Look, much bigger, easier to read, all on one page. Okay, at this point then, when you have your numbers down below completed, you have it so it prints on one page, go ahead and do File, Save, and submit this. This is going to be the completed sheet that you'll be submitting for grading. All right, good luck.